So welcome to this Facebook Live. So this Facebook Live is on the topic from frustration to ATP. This video is part of the 9 Shifts challenge, and we'll look at strategies for dealing with frustration and mindset shifts that will help make it easier to deal with the frustration. I'll explain what ATP means. It doesn't mean adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy carrying molecule used in cells. Means something else, but it actually does relate to that. So frustration is completely understandable if you have ME/CFS, if you're experiencing fatigue and symptoms, if you're not able to do the things you want to do, and if you're not being understood or told that the condition isn't real or is in your head. So I'm going to touch on some of those topics. I think dealing with people who don't understand is a whole topic, so I might not cover that in great deal in this video. It might be another video for another time. So if we think of frustration as knowing where we want to get to, but not being able to get there, not being able to achieve that goal. Got a question which is, why is frustration a good thing? So I want you to ponder that question, put your answer in the chat. What are your thoughts about that? Why is frustration a good thing? So hi everybody, hi, Lynn's saying hello. Yeah, do let me know where you are. Do let me know that you can hear me and that you can see my slides. In fact, be curious to know if you can actually still see me when I am showing my slides. So let me know. Yeah, so why is frustration a good thing? What are your thoughts about that? From my perspective, frustration is a good thing. So Claire's saying gives you energy and impetus to change. Yeah, it means that actually you haven't given up. You have the desire to reach a goal and you're frustrated because you haven't got there, but it does mean you haven't given up. And Lynn's saying because it teaches patience. Oh, that's very interesting. You should say that, Lynn. We'll come back to that. So why is it useful to address frustration? If we think about frustration as being resistance to what is, you know, the what is you've currently got ME/CFS symptoms, etc. Resistance to what is actually causes us suffering. Okay, so if we're resisting the reality of our situation, then that is just going to cause us suffering. There's a very interesting quote in the book The Road Less Travelled by M. Scott Peck. The first line of that book is, life is difficult, and if you accept that, then life becomes easier. I remember reading that quote and thinking, oh, actually that does make things easier. But I also think that life isn't always difficult. Sometimes life is easy, and you know, life flows, and so I just want to put that out there as well. Okay, so Lynn's saying she's from Liverpool. Yeah, just feel free to let me know where you are in the world. It's always nice to know. So second reason why, I'm going to use my iPad actually. So the first reason why we need to address frustration, let's talk about the why, is because the resistance causes us suffering. Okay. Second reason is that being in a state of frustration for a period of time actually activates the fight, flight, freeze response, okay? And it depletes our energy. When I'm working with clients, I talk about this concept of the energy bucket. And if you think about it, there are things we can do to deplete our energy, and there are things we can do to actually boost our energy. Whoops. Okay, so as I say, if we're in fight or flight, then we are depleting our energy. If we're actually in a more resourceful state, then the body can produce and store energy. When we're in that rest and digest state, that's what happens. So we've got Paul from Pittsburgh, Kathy from Utah. So thanks for letting me know where you are. Lynn is saying, I totally agree with the times we grow, other times we struggle. Yeah. So if we're in fight, flight, freeze, a lot of the time it's depleting our energy. Of course, if you have ME/CFS, your energy is already limited. Also, it takes us away from our goals. Okay, so if that's now and that's the future where we want to go, and our goal, your goal if you have ME/CFS is, to have energy to be able to do the things you want to do. So if we are consistently in fight, flight, freeze, that is actually taking us away from our goals, okay? Because when we're in rest and digest state, the body produces and stores energy. When we're in fight, flight, freeze, then the body stops producing and storing energy. It stops healing, which means, when our body isn't, detoxing, etc. So that's why it's really important to be mindful about how long we're spending in that fight, flight state. And the third reason is that, the fourth reason, so third is that it takes us away from goals. And the fourth reason is that whatever we practice, we get good at. Okay, this is the whole concept of neuroplasticity. If we practice frustration, anger, we get good at it. I remember working with a client who was angry a lot of the time. It had just become a habit. So let's focus on what we need to do. There are different ways of responding to frustration. First way is to suppress it. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that that's a good idea, but that's one strategy, okay? Second strategy is to inhabit it. There are times when I was generating frustration and I kind of set up camp there. It's almost like I said, right, I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to stay here. And actually, it's okay to do that for a bit, but we don't really want to live there. There were times when I acted on that frustration. I acted out that frustration, if you like. So, I generated frustration and all my self-care went out of the window. I kind of jettisoned my useful routines. I kind of overdid things. Maybe I just stayed up late and watched a film when I knew I really needed to take care of myself. But that was because actually I realized I hadn't got the balance right. I was trying so hard to get well. Then I would have this rebound effect. I'd do the complete opposite because I was trying so hard. And I realized that I had to find some middle ground that was a bit more sustainable. But, all that rest went out the window. All those good routines went out the window. I crashed. And then I sort of repeated the cycle, exhausted again, spent time having to really manage my energy. As I say, I had to learn how to break that pattern and find a middle ground. Okay. Now, once I learned brain training techniques, there were times I allowed myself to generate frustration or grumpiness, but over time I did spend less time there. Third strategy is to distract ourselves from it. Now, if we do that and that we sort of come out of those feelings of frustration, then that's great. So Kathy's saying, I felt that way lately. I need a break from trying too hard to recover. Yeah, I think that's really important, Kathy, that, we can try too hard. And certainly I did. At times I was trying too hard. And, it's a bit like someone who is trying to give up eating chocolate or cake and they avoid it totally. and they do well for a few weeks or whatever, and then they crack and they eat the whole cake and then they feel frustrated. And maybe it's better just to have a little bit of what we fancy. Because, there's part of us is saying, I have a need for that thing. It might be for a bit of fun. It might be, at one point I wasn't really watching telly. And this was, I got Emmy before the advent of computers and, Facebook. And, I didn't watch any telly, but maybe I could have just given myself a little bit of fun. We didn't have all the access to stuff, YouTube comedies that, we do now. And there's some really interesting research that says we can use oblique strategies. If you know what that is, pop a comment in the chat. It's something I'll come back to in a bit. Fourth strategy is that we process the frustration. Okay, so how do we do that? So let's talk about that. Now I've got a whole list of strategies. I want to share a few of them, otherwise this could be a long Facebook Live, and I do have a tendency to do Facebook Lives that are quite long, and someone asked me if I could do shorter ones. Claire's saying, I did a Zoom thing last night, which did me a lot of good, but meant, together with my meditation and journaling before bed, meant I slept later than I should have. Okay, so, a question I'd ask you is, when you think about doing that Zoom, when you think about that Zoom session that you had, what thoughts do you have now? Okay, and I asked that question because I've talked about this before. There was a time when I was having cognitive behavioral therapy, and the psychologist said, what's something you want to do? And I said, I'd love to go clubbing, but I can't because I've got ME. And she said, well, what if you rested for 2 days and then went out for a couple of hours? And I thought, well, actually, I could do that. And I was tired afterwards, but I had a big smile on my face. I was lying in bed with a big smile on my face because I was so happy that I just had so much fun. And Claire's saying it was so fun. So great. So, we don't have to do those things every day. If you didn't journal, the world will not stop spinning. Okay. The fact that you generated some good hormones is great. Okay, so that's fantastic. All right, so let's talk about how do we process frustration. The first thing is to acknowledge it. Just kind of saying, yeah, okay, I recognize I'm generating frustration right now. Okay, so we're labeling it, and by doing that, it actually makes it easier to do the next thing, which is to observe it, to take a mindful approach. Now, I have talked about that in another video. If you would like the link to that, then pop a comment below, maybe pop the word mindful, and I'll dig out that. It is on my Facebook page if you look at the videos, but I probably find it more quickly than you, so let me know if you want to watch that video. So if we do that, if we're able to observe our emotions, then we're less likely to inhabit and act out that emotional state. If anything I say doesn't quite make sense, just pop a question in the chat, say, can you clarify that bit? But hopefully you know what I mean by without inhabiting it, without acting it out. Okay. Next thing we can do is to discharge that that feeling or emotion. Okay. So, for example, if you're feeling upset and frustrated about your situation, ask this question: what do I need right now? Do I need to talk to someone? If I had ME/CFS now, I would say to someone, look, would you like to be a 5-minute buddy? Okay, and let me explain that. So I'd say to them, look, what I'd like to do, and I'm offering this to you as well. We might do this once a week, or we might do this on an ad hoc basis. If you need to have a chat, get something off your chest, let me know. We'll find a time, and you get 5 minutes to just offload. I'll listen. I won't say anything other than acknowledge, God, that sounds challenging. And at the end, you can say either, I don't want any advice from you, I just want you to listen. Or you might say, look, I'm happy for you to share a few thoughts. Okay, so that's definitely something I'd build into my support structure. I do actually have kind of some of these support structures. For instance, every Monday I have an accountability buddy where we set our goals for the week, and I find that really helpful. Okay, so that's one thing I would do. Okay, and if you want to know more about that and have got some energy, then you might check out co-counseling, which is a kind of way of doing that 5 minute buddy thing that I've just talked about, and you learn some strategies for having that kind of supportive relationship with someone. So check out co-counseling. You might have a conversation if no one is available. One strategy is to have an imaginary conversation with either your wise self, or you can imagine, right, who would I want to have this conversation with? Might be someone who you think actually this person is a real support in my life, or it might be someone you know by reputation. The author Napoleon Hill talks about having a room that he goes in, and there's people sitting around the table. Some of them are historical figures. It might be, I can't remember who he chose. I think he had possibly a president of America. I suspect it wasn't Donald Trump. And other wise people might be Albert Einstein, or anyway, I can't remember who those people were. But he would imagine having a conversation with them, and he would imagine what advice they might give them. The conversation might look like something like this. Oh, I feel really frustrated that I'm sick, I've overdone it. I'm really frustrated that I've overdone it. And the wise person might say, well, what can you learn from that? Okay, maybe I can learn A, B, C. Maybe I need to have some strategies around doing activity. And they might ask, well, what do you need to do right now? Well, maybe I need to forgive myself for the fact that I overdid it and I'm feeling fatigued. So it's about being creative with these issues. And that's something I've done, and I found it really powerful. So explore that. Another strategy is to express it. We know that and obviously you have to use your judgment here in terms of your energy, but shaking it off, or expressing it, making noise that sort of represents the frustration, is a good way of discharging it out of your system. As I say, use your judgment about that. But think about ways of expressing it. Might be through movement, might be through sound, might be through journaling. There is good research that shows that journaling can help process emotions. There's a really important piece that I think you need to consider if you are journaling, which is that, get it out of your system. You might do it in a little book, or you might do it on write it on some paper and then rip it up at the end. But I've always found a really useful way of ending is to think about some positive action. Okay, so considering what can I learn from this, and what action am I going to take, and ensure it's just 1 to 3 simple, achievable steps. Okay, I won't talk too much about this, but there is good actually, I don't know if it's research based. I think it is actually. There's a behavioral change expert called BJ Fogg, and he says, if we're setting goals, make them really small goals. We still get the good feelings when we achieve them, unless you are a high achiever and have to set the bar really high, in which case that's a pattern you need to address. So Kathy says, I love journaling. Fantastic. Excellent. All right. So the next strategy is to reframe. Okay. So I do now see that frustration is a call to do things differently. And I do think once we discharge some of that emotion, frustration, it can be easier to reframe things. So what does ATP stand for? ATP stands for, so reframe's the next thing. ATP stands for, first of all, acceptance. If resistance to what is causes us suffering, then actually accepting us lessens that. Okay. We might not have changed the fact that we're experiencing symptoms and stuff, but just by accepting that is already softening things. So fighting and resisting, as I say, just keeps our body in that stress state. I remember when I had ME, I went to a party and I met a woman who had MS. And I was talking about the things I was doing to try and help myself get better. And one of the things I was talking about is that I was changing my diet, and I'd been advised by a doctor trained in nutritional medicine to cut out sugar. And that was quite challenging because I love my blueberry yogurt. And, he said, well, maybe eat natural yogurt. And initially that was quite challenging because I loved my blueberry yogurt. But after a while, I just got used to it. And I told this woman that, I'd stopped using tomato sauce, and she looked horrified. She said, oh, I'm not making those changes. And I really felt that she was just fighting the condition rather than accepting it and kind of making peace with that's the way it is at the moment. So this is an important point about accepting. Accepting that I have the condition at the moment is different to accepting the condition as a permanent state. I actually refused to accept this as being a forever thing. Okay. And so that's the first bit, acceptance. The next bit is trust. So for me, that was about trusting in myself that I did have the capacity to find solutions. They might not be obvious right now, but I needed to just take that leap of faith. When we focus on what we don't want, then we aren't focusing on what we want and how to get there. So I've made a video very recently, I think last week, about moving from problem to solution. So again, do check out that video. It is on my Facebook page. What I realized is that having ME/CFS did require me to massively raise my game. I had to make changes that I would not have made had I not got sick. I remember someone sharing the quote with me, people are like tea bags. Any ideas why they're like tea bags? So Lynn's asking, what if you go round and round when you write down? Okay, that's a great question, Lynn, and I'm going to answer that in a moment, okay? So bear with me. But yeah, any ideas why people are like tea bags? I know there's a bit of a time delay between me and asking the question and you hearing me. Oh, actually, I realise I've been writing on my iPad and you haven't been seeing it. You don't know how strong you are till you're in hot water. That's right, Joanne. Okay. No good until they're in hot water. Okay. After a couple of years, dozens of failures, how do you maintain trust? That's a great question, Paul. What I'd say is that a couple of things. Sometimes people say to me, I've tried everything. And I say to them, okay, or I've tried a million things. And I got this from Tony Robbins. And I say, okay, tell me which million things you've done. And they say, okay, maybe not a million things, 100 things. Tell me what 100 things you've done. Okay, maybe I've done 5 things or 10 things. Tell me what 10 things you've done. And then we look at, well, what haven't you done? Or, sometimes people, I teach people a really simple technique for relaxation. And I say to people, look, practice that technique for 2 years. Okay. And if you're still not relaxed, then come back to me. So I do think, I totally get that it is more challenging to maintain trust and faith. And if that's the case, I remember someone saying, and I kind of adopt this, borrow some of mine. Okay. I have faith and trust, and I can honestly put my hand on my heart. I got MECFS back in 1997. And actually, I had a bit of a, I went from not being able to walk for 1 minute, got back on my feet. It wasn't a straight line, and that it wasn't a straight line because I was really good at sabotaging myself. But I did go from being able to walk for 1 minute to being able to work full time, live an active life. As I say, I was pretty brilliant at sabotaging myself at times. I had to I've had to work at that. Okay. But even if I still had MECFS and was bedbound, I honestly, for the majority of that time that I had MECFS, and I had it for 8 years, where I was spending a lot of time in bed, and I just absolutely refused to accept that this was going to be my life. Okay, so I really encourage you to do that. And if you need, if you don't feel you've got the faith and trust, then I'd really encourage you to, consider working with someone. Okay, I don't care. I'm not making a pitch for you to work with me. Work with someone. Find someone who you resonate with and work with them. Okay. One of the mistakes I made when I kind of started learning brain training techniques is I did a training program, and what I really should have done was carried on getting support. Okay, because I realized I needed help to keep raising my game, and I've said this before, but now I work with a coach. It is business and personal development, but I do that because I want to keep raising my game. Okay, so I hope that's given you a bit of food for thought. But yeah, before I got sick, I was complacent. There were bad habits that I had got into. And when I got sick, I realized I really had to work at getting my house in order. And I needed help with that. And it did challenge me to not be so self-sufficient, because before I got MECFS, I never asked for help. Okay. I always felt that I had to do it all on my own. And that was, if I didn't do it on my own, if I couldn't do it on my own, then I'd failed. So I had to let go of that. Okay. Because I needed help. Okay. I did need to surrender. I needed to let go of expectations. I had a goal, I had a desire, but I'd say in this moment, let's just focus on what I need to do right now that's going to help me take a small step forward. And that brings me to the next thing. The P stands for patience. Okay. So I've been drawing this quite a lot this week because this has come up when working with clients. It'd be great if change was linear, but it's not. It's up and down. Now, the dips are not the problem. Any guesses what the problem is? Claire says giving up in the dips. Yeah. What's another way of putting it? Trudy says my reaction to the dips. Exactly. Okay. The problem is responding to the dips in unhelpful ways. So I asked the question, is it possible to be in a dip? When I train people, I talk about this equation. E+R = O. I know there's a couple of people who are on the call who know what I'm talking about. E is the event, R is the response, O is the outcome. For any event, there are 3 possible responses. We can respond in a negative way, we can respond in a neutral way, and we can respond in a positive way. Question I ask people is it possible to respond to a dip in a completely calm, relaxed way? Claire's already said that, you know, she was feeling good, feeling happy about the fact that she'd had fun. And when I went out clubbing and was feeling tired, I was still happy. Question I'd ask you is, what is your default response to dips? A lot of people I work with, when they're in a dip, they are generating frustration and stress, and we've already talked about the consequence of that. Okay, so the dip is not the problem. The problem is how we respond to them. If we respond to them in an unhelpful way, that is the problem. Okay, so when we embrace acceptance, trust, and patience, the body accesses a state of rest and digest. Okay, and when we're in that state of rest and digest, the body, one of the things is the body starts producing and storing energy, which is where the ATP comes in. If you know all about the Krebs cycle, that's what helps our cells get energy. So the 6th strategy, the strategy that, you know, really for me was the game changer, was learning brain training tools. When I learned these techniques and kind of connected them to the training I'd already had as a counsellor, I learned how to process my feelings and emotions. And when I work with people, I'm teaching them techniques so that they can work with the frustration. They learn to understand how they're generating frustration, the relationship between what's going on in terms of our processing, and we process through our thinking, but we also process through other senses. So for instance, if you're walking down the street and suddenly a hungry tiger walks around the corner, you have a response that is based on your thinking, but you also have a bodily response, which is the primitive response, which is activated more quickly than the thinking process, which leads to the feelings of anxiety. Okay, we process that experience in an instant and we have the emotion of fear. Okay, and so people learn how to use that information, how to process that, and by understanding what's going on, that relationship between thoughts, feelings, emotions, we can shift them. When I work with people, we explore what are the conversations we're having that are resulting in those feelings, and some of the processing we're doing is unconscious. We don't even realize that we're doing it, but it is having a physiological response. So I talked about already neuroplasticity, this notion that whatever we practice, we get good at. If I practice frustration, I get good at it. If I practice acceptance, patience, and trust, I get good at that. Okay, so imagine we've got 2 pathways. And the signal is traveling down the neuron, and it can either go this way or it can go this way. So it travels down that neuron, and if we keep going down this pathway, that pathway gets thicker, stronger, and consequently faster. And the gap here between this neuron and this one will actually get smaller. The gap between this more useful neuron, actually, sorry, I didn't mean to cut it. It will move away. Okay, so the gap becomes bigger, and therefore, in order to go down this pathway, it takes conscious activity. Okay, but with practice, we can train our mind to start going down this pathway. If we do that, that pathway will get stronger. It will get closer. It will get faster. And again, this one will reduce. Okay, will move away. There's a quote that I talk about that kind of encapsulates this. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And I like this quote that I heard from a TED talk. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it isn't helping you. And for me, I started to learn that I needed to work with my frustration. So, hope that's given you some food for thought. Let's see if there are any other comments. So Joan says, as soon as I dip, I fear I'll not come back, even though experience says otherwise. Yeah, isn't that interesting? And Joanne, I've done exactly the same thing. Okay, so what I would recommend is that you create a little roadmap for you, and one of the things you write down in your little roadmap, and you might create a little file or something, is ways of dealing with dips. And you might say, you know what, you might write down, I need to remember that when I'm in a dip, I do come out of it, because that's so common. There's something about, and one of the reason that's happening is that when we're in that emotional state, we switch off the clever, rational part of the brain. Okay, so we are more reactive. So if we can do things to calm our physiology, then that will make a difference. So let's have a look. Let's see what other comments people have come. Lynn saying, the way you think, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but do feel free to let me know. Yeah, Lynn knows event, response, outcome, and we can either respond in a negative, neutral, positive way. So Lynn saying scared when in a dip, when coughing and wheezing. Okay, so what would be a simple strategy that you can employ? Again, write it down, put it in your roadmap or your handbook, and refer to it. Read it when you need to. Kathy says, in dips, I try and remember that I've come out of them before, and I will again. Yeah. Joanne saying, leaving you now before my brain packs in. We'll watch later. Thanks. You are welcome. So, if you'd like to finish with a brief relaxation, just put a yes in the chat and we will do that. Claire saying, yes, please. Okay. What I'd like to do is just make yourself comfortable. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, but obviously only close your eyes if it's safe to do so. And I'm going to guide you through a relaxation. So you are in charge. If at any time you need to stop to take care of yourself, please do so. As the recording asks you to close your eyes, only listen when you can safely do so. Don't listen to this recording when driving a car or any situation where it would not be safe for you to close your eyes. So just allow yourself to settle comfortably. You can either settle in a chair or you can do this lying down. And you can close your eyes as soon as you feel ready. Feel how it feels to have your body supported. Allow your hands and feet to settle in a comfortable position. You may want to uncross your feet, but just make sure you're positioned comfortably, and you can adjust your posture at any time as you allow yourself to enjoy this experience as you are guided through these exercises. So just bring your attention now to where you are and what you'd see if your eyes were open. The objects, the colours, the shapes. And now bring your attention to any sounds that you hear other than the sound of my voice. Noticing sounds that are close by, sounds that are in the distance. And you can allow those sounds that you don't need to pay attention to wash over you as you allow yourself to listen to the sound of my voice. So I'd like you to take a deep breath, breathing in slowly and steadily. And as you breathe out, just allowing your mind and body to relax. And again, breathe in slowly and deeply. And now releasing the breath slowly, allowing your mind and body to relax. Once more, take in another breath, slowly breathing into your belly. And as you slowly exhale, allow your mind and body to relax. And now just continue breathing normally. And with every breath, just allow yourself to feel as relaxed as you choose to feel. As you focus your awareness on your breathing, just imagine you can see the air going in as a colour. Imagining the air going into your lungs and then out again. Imagine you're breathing in pure, healthy energy. Each time you inhale, you are taking in from the universe all that you need. And each time you exhale, you are releasing all that you do not need. Letting go of anything that no longer serves you. I'd like you to imagine in your mind's eye that you're in the basket of a huge hot air balloon. It's completely safe and comfortable. Attached to that balloon is a sandbag, which represents those things that you are ready to let go of. Maybe it's self-criticism, lack of compassion, self-love, or something else. Imagine looking at that sandbag, and when you are ready, you untie that bag and free yourself from whatever has been holding you back. As you let go, feel yourself begin to rise as high as you choose. You're completely safe and in charge. You can go in whatever direction you want to. Higher, lower. And as you enjoy the pleasant journey, I'd like to just share some interesting stories. There's some interesting research that shows that if you give children something to read and it's in a font that's a bit more difficult to read, the children who have that difficult font actually performed better. There was another study where two groups had to solve a problem. One group was of 4 friends. The second group was 3 friends and a stranger. And the results were interesting. The 4 friends found the problem-solving exercise enjoyable, and they thought they had done well. But actually they hadn't done as well as the other group. There was some complacency. The group of 3 friends and 1 stranger found the experience a bit more uncomfortable because they were having to accommodate this stranger. And they doubted how well they had done. But they did outperform the group of friends. Many of you will have heard of the musician Brian Eno, who developed this concept called oblique strategies. Many bands, David Bowie, U2, Coldplay, have worked with him, and when they get a bit stuck, he has these cards called oblique strategy cards, and they randomly pick one card, and it might say swap instruments or accentuate the problem. So if someone isn't playing the part well, a piece very well, exaggerate that. Apparently Phil Collins got so frustrated with having to do that, he was throwing beer cans around the studio. And a guitarist who was working with David Bowie said to Brian Eno, "This is completely stupid." But years later, he actually used this same strategy with his students. The idea is if we get a bit stuck, we do something unexpected. Could be something completely ridiculous. So I'd like you to consider what is something you could do that's unexpected. So when Lynn asked the question, what do I do if I go round and round? It might be that we need to have a break, do something different. I know one guy who says that when he works in 50-minute slots, then he has a 20-minute break, and sometimes he just goes out and has a little dance in the kitchen to some music that he likes. And many people have said that when they get stuck, by leaving the problem, going and doing something else, solutions come. Just saw a smiley face. So consider that principle. If we get stuck, do something different. How many times have you kept trying to get that thing done rather than taking a break? I know that's something that I have done. And the interesting thing is that people don't think those oblique strategies will work. But research shows that when we're faced with challenges, we are more creative. And if we do something unexpected, we do perform better. I'll leave you with the story of Keith Jarrett. Some of you may know he's a jazz pianist. And he was due to do a concert in Germany. And the promoter of this event was a 17-year-old woman. She was the youngest promoter in Germany. And she took Keith to see the piano, and he was very concerned with the state of the piano. Some of the high notes were very tinny because the felt had worn away. The pedals were sticking. He felt that the piano was not big enough for the space, and he told her he can't perform, and went to sit in the car. He told her to get a new piano, but she couldn't get a new piano. She did manage to get a tuner, and so she went out in the car. It was pouring with rain, and she pleaded and begged with Keith Jarrett to play. And seeing this young woman, he said, "I will play, but know that I'm doing it for you." And so he sat at this piano, which had been tuned. He started playing. He didn't use the high keys, which had that tinny sound. He played some repetitive patterns on the bass notes. And if any of you have listened even to the first few minutes of the Köln Concert recordings, you'll know what an amazing piece of work that is. And it is, in fact, the most popular jazz piano recording ever. So I'd really invite you to allow yourself to feel acceptance. Maybe even to feel acceptance if you notice that you're feeling frustrated. But also, I'd invite you to accept the situation currently. But that doesn't mean you're accepting it forever. I'd invite you to meditate on the concept of trust. And I'd invite you to cultivate patience, to forgive yourself when needed. So when you're ready, I'd like you to just bring yourself back to the room, knowing that you can access these resourceful states. And when you're ready, you can just open your eyes and come back to the room. So today I've shared just a fraction of what I cover when I train people. If you'd like to know more about the training, then send me a message and I'll share a short video that you can watch which will explain more about what I do and how you can access a free strategy session where we'll identify 3 simple steps that you can take to help you move forward. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for contributing. Bye for now.